Here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight?
Fight against that? No! We will run!
And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15%.
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, quite a few topics to go over. One thing I'm going to get into since it's trending, once I get it up here, maybe. Okay. Here we go. What article I'm looking for. Let's make sure I can actually find the right one here. Okay. Here we go. Kurt Cobain's death, the suicide, crime scene photos that have been released, and I have here from Gawker, new photos from Kurt Cobain's suicide released. Says here, while Seattle police found no new information in their re-examination of Kurt Cobain's death, they have released previously unseen images from the scene of his suicide nearly 20 years ago. These two images were released to the media on Thursday afternoon, according to a report from the Associated Press. One was an image showing a box containing a spoon and what appeared to be needles on the floor next to a cigarette and sunglasses. The other showed the paraphernalia box closed next to cash and a wallet that appears to show Cobain's identification. Here it says, after reviewing the case and the previously undeveloped photos, Detective Mike Syansky, the man in charge of re-examining Cobain's death, confirmed it was a suicide. Sometimes people believe what they read, some of the disinformation from some of the books, that there was a conspiracy. That's completely inaccurate. Syansky said it's a suicide. This is a closed case. And Mark Dice put out a video here, and it's titled, Kurt Cobain's murdered by Illuminati according to new evidence, claim conspiracy investigators. And so let me go ahead and cue this up here.
The singer of Nirvana was murdered by the Illuminati, and it was made to look like a suicide. And here's 20 years later, the police have just released new, never-before-seen photos from the murder scene. Take a look at this. This is a photo of his heroin needles, apparently. Well, that just proves it right there. Countless people on YouTube, if you just search for Kurt Cobain Illuminati murder or Illuminati sacrifice, countless conspiracy people on YouTube have solved this case what the police couldn't do for 20 years. These new photos prove it. Why would a heroin addict who wrote a song called I Hate Myself and Want to Die commit suicide? I mean, as you know, oh, wait a minute. The Seattle police are saying that ignore the tweets about Cobain's death probe being reopened. Oh, what? The Seattle police aren't reopening the Kurt Cobain case according to the Washington Post? Well, if you just search YouTube for Kurt Cobain Illuminati murder or Illuminati sacrifice, you could see that countless people have solved the case. I mean, countless people who don't even know what Bavaria means when we're talking about the Bavarian Illuminati, but they've solved the Kurt Cobain murder case. I mean, as you know, no celebrity drug addict ever dies from an overdose. They're always murdered by the Illuminati. I mean, just search YouTube for Heath Ledger Illuminati murder, and you see just countless people. Why the Illuminati murdered Heath Ledger? Heath Ledger, the Illuminati sacrifice exposed. These people figured it out. These people don't even know the difference between operative masonry and speculative masonry, but they've cracked the Illuminati murder cases. I mean, you just keep going. Look at this. Paul Walker, he searched for Paul Walker Illuminati murder. These people figured it out. I mean, the Paul Walker Illuminati death video. I mean, 700,000 people have cracked this case. I mean, Illuminati killed Paul Walker. It's quite clear. It's clear as day. These people don't know what the gold standard is, but they've cracked the case of the Illuminati. I mean, just keep going here. Look at this. They solved the Whitney Houston murder. Illuminati murder sacrifice too. Whitney Houston was sacrificed by Illuminati. You decide. Illuminati, Whitney Houston sacrifice exposed. It's been exposed. They figured it out. They cracked the case, even though these people don't even know what an IRA is, or even know anything about it. But let me check this out. Philip Seymour Hoffman, another drug addict who supposedly died of an overdose, but everybody knows that this was Illuminati sacrifice as well. I mean, these people don't know what state the Skull and Bones secret society fraternity is located in, but they're so smart they have cracked the case of all these murders. I mean, just a couple more here. Michael Jackson, this is probably one of the most famous ones. And these people don't even know really more than 3 of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, but you know what? They're so smart. They've cracked this case. They solved the Michael Jackson murder too. And Aaliyah, she's been murdered as well. They killed her for just because no celebrity dies from natural causes, and the countless celebrities who have drug problems, none of them ever die from their drug overdoses. I mean, just search YouTube for insert celebrity name here who's died, Illuminati murdered, and you'll just find that the cover story, the cover story is just a lie. They've all been sacrificed. These celebrity gods, and this now Kurt Cobain's new suicide photos released 20 years later just proves that they've been covering this murder sacrifice up for 20 years. Revealing this new photos. It's a suicide, he says. This is a case closed. Sometimes people believe what they read, says the medical examiner, says the Seattle Police Department's website. The reason the photos were not released before is that investigators felt it was a suicide and already had Polaroids from the medical examiner. Oh, well, that's just another cover story. Like I said, Kurt Cobain wrote this song, I Hate Myself and Want to Die, and I don't know why somebody like that would kill themselves. This is obviously Illuminati murder. So the case has been solved. Kurt Cobain's, Heath Ledger, Whitney Houston, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Michael Jackson, all of these people that have died from massive drug abuse, they were really actually murdered. No celebrities die. Only ordinary people who do drugs die from the overdoses. And so these YouTube sleuths they've figured it out. They've cracked the case. And like I said, they don't know what Bavaria is, and the Bavarian Illuminati don't know the difference between operative masonry and speculative masonry. Don't know what the gold standard is. Don't know what state Skull and Bones is in. Don't even probably know what school it's at. These people have figured out these Illuminati murders. So just a heads up, Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new. Check out some of the previous videos and the playlists. Hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. And stay tuned because there's more videos coming soon.
Okay, I really wanted to play that because it really kind of, what it does is it leads into how everything anymore is either a false flag or it's a conspiracy theory, and you've really seen it just explode into everything's a conspiracy theory, and everything's on the table, and it amazes me. Now, when we have anything legitimate, a legitimate death where someone did kill themselves, or did overdose, or was hit by a car, or was speeding and wrecked their car, none of it is ever looked at legit anymore, and it's automatically a conspiracy theory. And why is that a problem? Well, that's a problem because if we're searching for truth and what's really going on, then we can't just have so much disinformation out there and not call it out. Kurt Cobain, he had drug issues. I don't doubt that it was a suicide. Maybe it was a conspiracy theory, but I haven't ever seen any evidence. He lived a rock star's life, and he did drugs, and it's pretty plausible that he killed himself. So, it's something I want to bring up because it's just going nuts on, all over. So, if you want to call in, comment on that, phone lines are open, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. One thing I did want to get into is some, information that I've seen two sources come up, and there's two names that pop up in both of these, and that's Bill Kristol. And it looks like Ron Paul's being attacked again. The first one actually came from Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And here it says, "Dear friends, this week, arch neocon Bill Kristol unleashed his attack dogs against my Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Our dozens of media appearances and hundreds of articles opposing their plan for war with Russia over Ukraine is just too much for them. This week in the Daily Beast and in Kristol's own Washington Free Beacon, a coordinated attack has been launched to defame, discredit, and silence my institute. Why? Because the American people are hearing our message, and by an increasing majority, they oppose U.S. intervention in Ukraine and everywhere else. And everywhere else the neocons want to bomb. My op-ed this week in USA Today, the nation's largest circulation newspaper, was highlighted on the hugely popular Drudge Report. Our ideas are getting even more traction, and they cannot stand that. So they are using their enormous resources to try to silence our message of peace and prosperity. We want engagement and diplomacy. They want sanctions and war. We may not have nearly the resources of the war party, but the good news is that we can do much more, so much less, because we work harder and we have the truth on our side. And, if you go to ronpaulinstitute.org, you can find that on there. And normally I probably might not bring something like this up on the broadcast, but then I came across another article on Ben Swan. This one's titled, "Was RT Anchor Resigning on Air a Stunt Coordinated with the Guy Who Created Ron Paul Racist Newsletter Scandal?" Here it says, the story broke by Max Blumenthal and Rania Kalkoff. Truth Dig claims that the on-air resignation of RT America anchor Liz Wall was actually coordinated with a neocon think tank and driven in part by Daily Beast Daily Beast writer James Kirchick. More on him in a minute. According to the report by Truth Dig, much of evidence that Wall's resignation was not spontaneous moment in which she could no longer deal with RT's propaganda can be traced back to tweets which were sent out about a half hour before Wall's final newscast. Though the tweets themselves didn't come from Wall, but rather from a neoconservative think tank, Foreign Policy Initiative, which was started by Bill Kristol. Yes, the same Bill Kristol that was mentioned in that letter from Ron Paul and the Ron Paul Institute. Says here, the first tweet from FPI went out 19 minutes before Wall's resignation, and its hashtag word on the street says, "You're really going to want to tune in to RT. Something big may be going down." And they retweeted that 10 minutes later, or 10 minutes before her resignation. First one was about 20 minutes. And then 2 minutes before another tweet, "Guys, tune in to RT." And then finally at 5:26 p.m., the exact moment when Liz Wall resigned, they posted, "RT anchor resigns on air. She cannot be part of a network that whitewashes the actions of Putin." Clearly someone at FPI was already aware that Liz Wall was going to resign her anchor position at RT America Live on air. And I'm going to go ahead and play the clip here from that resignation.
Last night, RT made international headlines when one of our anchors went on the record and said Russian intervention in Crimea is wrong. And indeed, as a reporter on this network, I face many ethical and moral challenges, especially me personally, coming from a family whose my grandparents came here as refugees during the Hungarian Revolution, ironically to escape the Soviet forces. I have family on the opposite side, on my mother's side, that sees the daily grind of poverty. And I'm very lucky to have grown up here in the United States. I'm the daughter of a veteran. My partner is a physician at a military base where he sees every day the first-hand accounts of the ultimate prices that people pay for this country. And that is why personally I cannot be part of a network funded by the Russian government that whitewashes the actions of Putin. I'm proud to be an American and believe in disseminating the truth. And that is why, after this newscast, I'm resigning.
And then the article goes on to say, but the plot thickens. It was just over an hour after Wall was off air that she sat and conducted an exclusive interview with none other than 31-year-old James Kirchick. The two then tweeted out a picture together, which they titled a freedom selfie. The Truth Dig story explains Kirchick has written for neoconservative publications such as Commentary, but that isn't half the story. James Kirchick is known for more than just being a neoconservative. In 2007, Kirchick was working for the New Republic magazine when he did an expose on the infamous Ron Paul newsletters, in which he, in his hit piece on Congressman Ron Paul, Kirchick divulged to readers that Texas congressman had for 20 years written a racist, homophobic newsletter. I became aware of Kirchick in January of 2012 when viewers asked me to take a look at the Ron Paul newsletter story. What I found was that the claims made by Kirchick were greatly exaggerated. And this one is actually by Ben Swan on benswan.com. Says here that out of a minimum of 200 newsletters spanning some 20 years, there were only 9 that included words or phrases that might be considered racist. More importantly, those 9 editions did not include a byline. When my story aired explained the situation, Kirchick responded on Twitter exclaiming that I was attempting to downplay his revelations regarding the newsletters. That led to a follow-up on my part. This time I disclosed information that from 2007 to 2012, Kirchick had buried in his reporting. And, can't remember exactly which one this one is, but this was Ben Swan's report. One of them, I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one. I think it's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and play this too. Okay, it's got a commercial, so give me a second here. Not gonna make you have to listen to that, so. Not quite yet. Just give it a quick second here. Commercials always lag for some reason.
An enormous. The writer who first released copies of the newsletters contacted Ben to set the record straight on who else was writing some of those newsletters. Ben, information that isn't being reported anywhere else, and he's sharing it in a reality check reply.
First of all, let me thank the writer, James Kirchick, for getting back with me today. I told you last night that in 2007, the New Republic magazine published copies of the Ron Paul Report, the Ron Paul Strategy Guide,
So this is the second report.
In those newsletters, there were some passages that could be deemed racist and certainly inappropriate. One caveat, though, I also pointed out that the author of those articles, James Kirchick, mentions that none of the racist newsletters have a byline, except for one. The only problem, back in 2007, he did not disclose the name of that writer or which edition he or she wrote. Until today. For the first time, I'm going to share with you the name of that writer. Take a look. It is a 1993 edition of the Ron Paul Strategy Guide. The article, How to Protect Against Urban Violence. And the author, one James B. Powell. After 4 years of reports on these newsletters from all kinds of media outlets, I have not seen this guy's name anywhere. And the full 8 pages, well, they match so closely to some of the other so-called racist newsletters, it is stunning. Powell writes about the 1992 riots in Los Angeles, as well as what he calls the Holocaust coming to America's urban areas. He calls California Congresswoman Maxine Waters a militant leader. And the article goes on to talk about how to be self-reliant when well-armed gangs move in to threaten your home. Like the other newsletters, it's not racist per se, but certainly could be deemed questionable or insensitive. And certainly the content of that newsletter very similar in style to the other so-called racist newsletters. But there is a bigger issue than just Ron Paul here. What you may not know is that in this presidential election cycle, every single candidate for president, including President Obama himself, has been called a racist. Herman Cain was called a racist because he said that blacks had been brainwashed into voting for the Democratic Party. Mitt Romney called a racist by Bill Maher because he's a Mormon, and called a racist by MSNBC for continually calling the president by his first and last names instead of saying President Obama. Newt Gingrich was called a racist a few months ago for calling Palestinians an invented people. Michelle Bachmann called a racist a few months ago after saying African-American children and black families were better off during slavery, presumably because they had both parents living with them. She said she was taken out of context. Rick Perry, he was called a racist for a name spray painted on a rock at a hunting camp rented by his family. Also saying he was taken out of context, by the way, one of the latest claims against Rick Santorum, he's being called a racist for a supposed statement that he made that blacks shouldn't receive welfare. He says he didn't say that. And of course, President Obama himself has been called a racist by many people, including Glenn Beck, who triggered a firestorm after saying that he believes President Obama doesn't like white people. President Obama also called a racist for attending the Reverend Wright's church for 20 years. So here's what you need to know. The talk of racism has become the lowest form of political discourse. But even as I just went down that list of candidates, some of you at home thought to yourselves how the candidates you don't like, well, they probably are racist. And when you heard the name of a candidate you support, you thought, no, that's ridiculous. See how it works? Anything that can be deemed insensitive these days is called racist. Anyone who stands too close to those who say those things are racist. Under the examples I just gave you, are they all racist? Maybe none of them are. How about this year? We try to have an election based on substance and on ideas and on political record rather than on name calling. And that is Reality Check. One thing I want to make clear, this report was posted by the New Republic with the byline of James B. Powell in 2008, but the link to the newsletter was separate from the other articles that were linked by TNR that were suspected of being written by Dr. Paul. And even though the story was posted in the original article, Powell's name was never used. For the past 4 years, we have searched for and looked for any reports about this story and not found a single one about Powell and the Ron Paul newsletters, even from the New Republic. I'm going to post the entire 8 pages of his newsletter at the end of this story on our website. You can read it for yourself. Along with that, you can read...
Okay. It says here that information had not only been buried by Kerchak, but had been ignored entirely by other media, which he explained in that. Let me see here. I'm going to scroll down. Says combined James Kerchak, who already has a record of writing hit pieces on behalf of neocons, with Liz Wall's resignation, and the end result should make anyone with critical thinking skills pause. As for Kerchak's track record when it comes to standing up against propaganda, that part of the story is almost laughable. As Truth Dig points out, Kerchak worked for part of 2011 out of Prague for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, a media network funded by Congress, formerly backed by the CIA, that functions like the American answer to RT in Russia-aligned Eastern European countries. As for Liz Wall, if she truly believed that she was being forced to report propaganda, then she has every right to resign her position with RT as she did. On the other hand, to have worked with people like Kirchick in order to capitalize on the resignation, I will leave to the reader to decide the folly or wisdom in that. And, the simple fact that, we have her working with this group that was definitely aware, whether it was for her, personal, success from that, or if it was, these pro-war people trying to use that and, capitalize on that. It's not true. Why she did it? Well, yeah, if she felt, like she couldn't work for him, that's one thing. But when you take those actions, I think it shows a type of person that, was not planning on, leaving there without having a backup plan with the neocons. And it's a pro-war movement. So to say that, well, she doesn't, want to go along with Putin's, war to basically side with the warmongers on our side is just as bad. And so it's kind of hypocritical in that sense. That's my view on it. Again, we do have open phones, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. You can comment on that. The story I brought up right before was the Kurt Cobain, and I played the clip from Mark Dice. If you want to comment on that, or this article that I just covered, talking about Kirchick, and, the Ron Paul letter that, Bill Kristol, and, you have all these people really pushing for war. And how does that play into, what's going on? Do you think the U.S. and maybe a group of, the warmongers are really looking to push war with Russia? Where do you see this going? Again, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. If you have me on, Skype, you can go ahead and contact me on Skype too, and I can bring you into conversation. There's something going on, and I don't know if they're pushing for war or they're just trying to manipulate it. But no matter what, do you think Obama would he push for war? There's a lot of talk, but would he ever take those steps? And I really don't think that, he has that type of mentality that he would. But on the other hand, he is pretty naive, in my opinion. I really don't know where this is going. And, you do see that little group of warmongering neocons that are really trying to push hard sanctions and war. And they're using so-called libertarian outlets to try to push that. And I think that's where you really definitely will see, a difference between Tea Party libertarians and capital L libertarians. That's where you're going to see a division, when it comes to the outlets, libertarian and so-called libertarian outlets. It's amazing. And then, there was something that was brought up in that last article. Let me find it again. And this really, is kind of laughable and sad and angering all at the same time. Make you feel bipolar there for a second. Let me see exactly where it is. Right here. It said here, as Truth Dig points out, Kirchik worked for part of 2011 out of Prague for, listen to this, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, a media network funded by Congress, formerly backed by the CIA. Okay, so our government, CIA too, have a station called Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty overseas. Here in the United States, within our borders, they look at liberty groups, libertarians, Tea Partyists, sovereign type people, individualists, preppers, naturalists. They look at all these freedom groups, liberty groups, as possible domestic terrorists. At the same time, they fund propaganda pushing liberty and freedom. Well, their propaganda version of it. Call it Radio Liberty and Radio Free Europe overseas. And we have the same thing from RT. RT exposes the police state in the United States. It exposes the militarization of our police in the United States. They've exposed a lot of corruption. Maybe not exposed it, but brought it to light to more people than our own media. They've talked about these things. You have Abby Martin with ability to have control over her own show and put out the information she wants to put out. We have a problem here with RT pushing, exposing the corruption, the police state here, but in the same light they are heavy-handed over in Russia. Then we have the U.S. that is becoming extremely heavy-handed over here in the United States, over its own citizens, which America does, lock up more people than any other country. So, we have cages for people like animals, but promote freedom and liberty overseas. That's where we have a problem. We shouldn't have our government over there pushing any ideology, because government is always going to be anti-liberty. Now, it's one thing if you as a person gets on, the internet and does a broadcast and promotes liberty. That's your right to express that. If a individual in government wants to just express themselves, and other countries, other people around the world happen to pick up on that, then great. But when government is kind of the opposite of freedom, when it's always going to be anti-freedom, anti-liberty. Government can't be pro-freedom. It can't be pro-liberty, because it makes it illegit. Therefore, it has to fight against liberty. It has to fight against freedom to survive. So for them to promote liberty and freedom is kind of oxymoron, I guess you would call it. It's one of those things that's just, it proves that our countries are more interested in promoting things overseas than promoting your own individual freedom. And that's the key problem. We don't have a government that's going to promote your freedom, your liberty, because your freedom and your liberty don't benefit them. To liberate or to free a society overseas tends to come with bombs and a lot of collateral damage. Therefore, it's really counterproductive for those people's freedom and liberty, their ability to pursue happiness, because they're kind of dead from, well, they were collateral damage is what we call it, or what the U.S. calls it, government. So how is this working towards freedom? What it does is it benefits government. Because now there's people that need help. Who has the monopoly on the ability to go around the world and dispense help? The U.S. military. You know, the Navy commercial that says, U.S. Navy, you know, a global force for good. A global force. No, U.S. Navy. Not, they don't even put U.S. Navy really. It's big Navy. You just see Navy when it pops up. You don't think U.S. because all you see is Navy in big letters, and they say a global force for good. They consider themselves the world's Navy. They were supposed to be defending our borders from tyrannical governments trying to impose control over the people in our borders, called the United States. That was the supposed to be, you know, what the Navy was. Not even supposed to have a standing army. The militia would be your standing army when that time arose that you needed it. Well, now we got a Navy that's a global force for good, I guess, is what they want to call it, if you believe that. We poke our heads into all these other countries. And then you think about, you know, the short discussion on Kurt Cobain and conspiracy theories, and everything anymore is a conspiracy theory. Anything anymore is a false flag. Well, every attack on America cannot be a false flag when America is sticking their nose in everybody else's business. Definitely when you go into a country that they have a loose national government that's not really all powerful, but more localized governments are more powerful. Then we have our little empire go pop their head in there and stir things up and create chaos and try to bring their own order to it. And these people that are now having to deal with world government type situations, that the most they've seen is localized. You're making people mad. We have people here that have dealt with a federal government that's been large for basically most of everybody's life. Even though at current point it's quite large. There's instances during war that a government had a lot of control, but they also had a lot of cooperation. Vietnam, they didn't, which helped lead to the end of it. I don't think it really was what finalized the end of it, but I think it helped push to the end of it, all the protesting and everything. But for the most part, our government is ultimately, so big. Well, you think of how mad people are now that have dealt with the large federal government, that are starting to go, hey, maybe we should, not do things at the federal level and do it more localized. Then our government is taking more localized countries and trying to make them more nationalized and world government, oriented. And you don't think you're going to anger people that have been able to live their lives as they choose, as a community, that now have to answer to a national government that is being controlled by a world government. Not everything is going to be a false flag. Not everything is a conspiracy theory. Or a conspiracy at that, and not everything's a conspiracy theory. A lot of things are, legit questions that people are trying to bring up. And when you see, people try to not even explain it, but hide, the fact that something happened, makes you question. But, we really have to, not always take everything, at face value and really start doing our research. And that's what gets me is, I've had a few people that they'll send me all kinds of, videos. And it's like, I'm not going to look at, a video, has Miley Cyrus, eating humans or so. Like what, what are you doing with your time? You really need to start looking at more educational things, something that, has factual basis to it, maybe, that there might be a little evidence to. They'll look at that, but I guarantee you, some of those same people will go, Building 7 didn't fall after the lady said it fell. The BBC news reporter that reported on it way before it fell. Oh, they would deny that even happened. Oh, that's fake. It did. Why she reported it? What the, why was it blown up, or why did it fall, or, what's the whole story behind? I'm not the expert on it. There's architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and, thousands of, architects and engineers that, claim they have the evidence to prove that, it was a controlled demolition. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. That's for you to research. That's for you to find out. I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to go down that road. Because no matter what, let's say terrorists did everything. There is no conspiracy 9/11. Okay. Does that still give government a right to take your rights away? Does that give them moral authority to take your rights away? For safety? Who cares who did it? Does that give government a right to take your rights away? And I would hope most people say no. That's the reason to ensure everybody's individual right. Their First Amendment right. Their Second Amendment right. The right to defend themselves. But we have a society that something bad happens, the moment government goes, we'll help, just give us this, they run and hand over whatever freedoms they have left. Okay. Give me a second here. Give me a quick second here. I closed my browser and I had to sign back in here and deal with that. I kind of keep all my settings where it doesn't save anything, so I think it's a better way to do it. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been active in Facebook and, creating pages on Facebook, sharing articles on Facebook. If any of you were involved in during the Ron Paul and Republican thing, we had a lot of Facebook pages censored. A lot of people censored. I was censored for posting on my own page. And it seemed to only be Ron Paul supporters. And, well, most people experience that. There's one from Adam Kokesh. And he spoke to a Facebook representative at CPAC. And it was pretty interesting, so I want to go ahead and play this. I had it saved here, so make sure I don't have a commercial right off the bat, which I probably do.
With Facebook especially, there's the issue of censorship, and a lot of people have become distrusting of Facebook because, posts of people with firearms get taken down, sometimes controversial things get flagged, and people end up going, what the heck is this? This is like the CIA book now. Do you have any thoughts on that, or what would you do?
Well, on the latter,
people who are suspicious of Facebook?
Well, I wouldn't be. I think that we try to make it easy for users to flag. Right, we try to make it easy for users on both sides. For anybody, like frankly anyone to, if they see something that they don't like or they flag, it's all about the user experience because this might be harmful. The gun thing, for example, that shouldn't affect anybody who's advocating for gun rights or Second Amendment rights. It's that folks who are selling, as far as like content in general. It's all about finding what your audience wants to engage with.
So you really think all the problems that people are having with that are just they're just glitches?
Well, everything goes through the process. The humans who have to manage all of these complaint requests and how you decide what's.
You just heard from Don Seymour, the U.S. politics and government outreach manager for Facebook. And if you're on Facebook as much as me and you love it as much as I do and you understand what a powerful tool it is, it's very disturbing to see how a lot of people, especially as political activists, run into censorship on Facebook. Accounts get deleted, people get blocked. I've been blocked myself for stuff that I know is specifically in any interpretation of the rules totally within Facebook's guidelines. And it's really disturbing to see some of the various forms of censorship that happen on Facebook. But Don is saying that none of that's any kind of agenda. It's all within the rules, and those are just glitches in the matrix. Because humans have to review when things get flagged, and that's all that is. That there's no Facebook program to limit conversation about guns or anti-Obama rhetoric or cursing or any kind of censorship at all. It's only just little glitches in the matrix that you got to worry about. But if you've been on Facebook like me, you might have noticed that there's a bit of a pattern there. So I don't know. What do you think? Should we get some more numbers on this? Should we investigate more and maybe have people that have experienced this pool their experiences and let people know what they've gone through? Hey, email me if you've got some kind of experience like this that you want to get on the record. We're going to be talking about this more on Adam versus the Man. Is Facebook really an upfront entity? It's becoming, the CIA book now, and a lot of people think that it's potentially a tool of the government to spy on people and in many ways steer the conversation in the interests of the powers that be. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Email me if you've got an incident you want to report, and we're going to keep the conversation on the internet as a vibrant, open one, with or without Facebook. Whether or not they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, we'll see. More importantly,
okay, you can go check that out. Adam Kokesh's YouTube. But what he said is, that the people who have to deal with those reviews, they ultimately really decide what's good or bad. So you just have random people deciding what's good or bad to be on Facebook. No set of guidelines that they must follow if they are anti-gun people and they just go after every every pro-gun thing on there. They don't have any repercussions or, the simple fact is Facebook does censor. I believe Facebook to be majority of them, the people they hire for certain positions, I think they hire for a reason. People that have the same ideology, and I do think one of them is not being pro-gun. I think two of them, or number two would be, they are very big government. I think they look at themselves as big and government as big and ultimately powerful. And I think they like that type of status. I think the mainstream media, the government, the politicians, these large corporations, the CEOs, I think a lot of these people like the fairy tale kingdom, kings and princesses. I think they look at that as some ultimate society of kings and princesses and these families that were able to rise to such success, as many of them like to put themselves and their, family. They believe that, well, we should be in charge because we're much smarter. Even though a lot of times, what is it? They were able to play government to their success. Okay, sorry there. It's usually manipulation of laws, manipulation of government to succeed. Monopolies, basically. And I really think that is a lot of root to most of the large corporations. And, you can see it back all the way into the Rockefellers and, and then, now we have to stop the monopolies, so we have to break up Standard Oil. You don't think that was planned? Why do you think Rockefeller owned majority shares in the companies that came out of Standard Oil? Do you think Standard Oil really got broke up? Or what did that do? Did that possibly create a situation where it would be extremely hard for anybody to ever get as rich as Rockefeller, knock him off the top? Was that a guarantee of wealth, maybe? Just looking at the facts, I come to my own conclusion, and you can look at the, whole backstory, look into, how Rockefeller, before they attacked or supposedly went after monopolies, before government started doing that, and you can see where Rockefeller was helping write legislation that helped him out. And then after Standard Oil was broke up, he had shares in the companies that came out of it. So, things like this are a lot of times used by government to attack. Well, see how government had to step in and stop Rockefeller? No, I see how government was so in bed with Rockefeller that you're able to go, hey, look, you created a monopoly. By the way, at the same time, they were the ones that helped him create that monopoly. Oh, and now, we have to stop it, which he helped you plan. Oh, yep, I'm too big. We should never allow this to happen. I'm such a bad man. And he stays rich and profits off of everything he was profiting off before, giving pennies to other people to let them get a little bit of money there. Okay. I had another one here. Deciding on which one I want to play. Multiple options here. Okay, here we go. Just waiting for it to load here. And this one's from We Are Change. And it's alleged Silk Road founders' mother speaks out.
Hi, I'm Lynn Ulbricht, and I'm the mother of Ross Ulbricht, who's the defendant in the Silk Road case.
Can you tell us what's currently happening with your son?
Yeah, he is in prison at MDC Brooklyn in New York, and the discovery process is beginning, so that which we've been looking forward to, because this is the time when Ross and his legal team can begin to look over the evidence presented by the prosecution and begin to prepare their defense.
Now, I know there's a lot of accusations against Ross. Is there any information to those allegations that the people out there should know about?
Well, one thing is that he was formally arraigned a few weeks ago, and one of the things that had been charged previously was something about murder for hire and planned violence. And this was not part of the formal arraignment. He was not formally indicted for these things. So that is a change. His father and I always knew that wasn't true. We have faith in our son and his integrity, but the fact that he was not formally indicted for these things is significant. It is mentioned as from what I understand from our attorney, as an uncharged crime that is not required to be proven. So I don't really quite understand what that is and why something wouldn't be required to be proven. But from what I understand, it is not a part of the formal indictment.
Now, what kind of precedent does this case set?
You know, I'm not very qualified to talk about the case, to be honest. I don't know anything about the case. I'm not told any details. It seems to me that, I don't know of other cases that have focused on the internet, on encryption, on Bitcoin. It seems to me that it's opening up a lot of areas that are new in our legal system. But I'm certainly not qualified to comment on it.
Are there any part of the story that should be told that is not being told by the mainstream media?
Well, I've certainly read way too often, without the word alleged, by the media that Ross did this or Ross did that, and a lot of times they're heinous acts. And I would like to say that Ross is a man of integrity. He is a compassionate person. He is someone who would never hurt another human being or an animal. He has very high standards, and it's very hard to read things written by people who have no idea who he is and who basically just accept at face value what either they've read, either in the charges or in other media outlets. But the person that I read about occasionally, too often, in the media is not Ross. And it's very disappointing and disconcerting. I've seen things taken out of context, distorted, misquoted, and it's very upsetting to see that happen.
Is there an example of it that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I can say an example. There was a YouTube video where he was asked by his friend, kind of in a joking way, hey, do you think you could live forever? And Ross said, well, with the technology the way it is, sure, that could be possible, in kind of a light way. And two different, Rolling Stone and the New York Times both, took that out of context and made it sound like he was some kind of megalomaniac who believed he could actually live forever and that he had come up with this. And if you saw the video, you would know that it was like a lighthearted conversation talking about technology. And it made him sound like something else. And that's just one example of taking a little comment out of context and turning it into a more sensationalistic picture that distorts the truth.
Why do you think this is happening to your son?
I really can't comment on that. I don't know.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to say to the people out there who are watching this video?
I think this is an important case. Now, again, I'm not qualified to discuss the case, or even to comment on the case. I don't. But from what I've been told, and from what I can see myself, our lawyer said that it's very traditional for the government to use high-profile cases to make bad law. And I think some things at stake here are, the future of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is specifically mentioned in the indictment. It seems to me that internet privacy and internet freedom could be addressed in this case. And it's an historical precedent-setting case because it's addressing things that haven't been addressed in our courts, I don't believe. And it's a whole new world of evidence, of it's a new world to me too. But the whole subject of Tor and encryption and internet commerce and all of that. It seems like there's a lot of that is new in the courts.
Can you tell us about the Legal Defense Fund and why people should get involved and help?
Yeah. Here is a scannable QR code that takes you to our website. It will take you to a landing page. It'll take you to the website and also ways to donate. We, contrary to popular opinion, another misconception is that Ross is rich. Ross has nothing. He's completely dependent on his parents to put money in his commissary. He has nothing. We are not rich people. And we want a fair trial for him. We want the best defense for him and the best forensics to analyze this very complex and difficult data. And because this case will be precedent-setting and will affect us all, we're asking for help. And it doesn't have to be a lot. If a lot of people gave a little, it would make the difference. So I'm just here trying to raise awareness and raise funds for his defense. Ross does not belong in prison. He has a lot to give. He has a lot to contribute, and I look forward to the day that he'll be free.
And again, that was from We Are Change on YouTube. FreeRoss.org was the website that QR that you heard her speak about would take you to. FreeRoss.org if you're interested. Different people have different views on it, and if you are interested in it, you can go check it out there at FreeRoss.org. There's one thing that she brought up in that, and she's exactly right. A lot of what goes on in this case will have a precedent with Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin rebounding right now, after Mt. Gox and failed and all that, which a lot of people have come to a pretty good agreement that was a good thing, looking at Mt. Gox as someone that inflated Bitcoin a lot, and a lot of mistrust with Mt. Gox, and that's why it should have failed. It's one of those things that this case could really set a precedent that could harm Bitcoin. And I think a lot of the prosecution's case rests on Bitcoin and trying to connect it with Ross, the certain accounts and all that. Just if you want to get involved, really research it and know your information when you want to go out and maybe speak with other people about it. I can give you sources. I can do things like that. You can always hit me up at, anti-tyrannynews.com. There's a contact tab. I can give you some sources, but the web is easy to navigate if you really try. And, one thing with Google, Google pisses me off all the time. They're always changing everything and just drives me insane. But, with their analytics and stuff and their cookies and all that, and tracking your IP address, which is a major thing, they can actually limit your search results. So, if you go to anti-tyrannynews.com or startpage.com, it's a way to surf the internet without having this analytic type thing stuck on you where it might censor or, put certain web pages above others. With the technology, with what Google's doing, I really think they want to censor it. And then, Start Page can pull information, from other search engines too, I believe. But it's usually been a pretty good, way to find articles that I wouldn't normally find using Google. Okay, I have one here. This one is out of OhioLibertyCoalition.org. And this kind of hit me because I've talked about Common Core and, things like that, and with the young and trying to teach them and, trying to, not let them be indoctrinated in collectivism and just, march in your line and, obey, basically. Actually teaching them meaningful things. Okay, this one is titled, again, OhioLibertyCoalition.org, but it's titled Private Student Data Transferred to Pearson Access in Preparation of Common Core Field Tests. PARCC and Pearson Access have requested the following student data in preparation of their Ohio field testing this spring. The student state, student identifier code, student's legal name, date of birth, which is optional, I guess, gender, race, type of disability, disability accommodations, gifted status, free lunch qualifier. The field test will take place March 24th, April 11th, and May 5th, June 6th. To determine if your school district is participating in the PARCC spring field testing, see listings at the end of the Cleveland.com article, Ohio students to test drive new Common Core exams. We'll see what schools will be taking part here. Please note the additional school districts, and I'm not going to get into that. Actually, says, please note the additional school districts not listed can still request to participate in the field testing and thus transfer student data to Pearson Access. They will set the following deadlines for the submission of student data for the field testing. Performance-based assessments, paper tests, online tests, end-of-year assessments, paper tests, online tests. I guess why this might be a problem is privacy and giving this information over. Here it says, school districts had the power to refuse participation in the PARCC field testing, and districts could provide parents with prior notification of any data release. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, was amended in 2011 by the U.S. Department of Education, apart from Congress to allow for the transfer of private student data to a third party without parental consent. Before 2011, any transfer to a third party would have had to be approved by a parent or guardian, which I knew from when I was in school, that was something that they would have to get permission. Field trips or anything. If you went somewhere and they wanted your data just to maybe send you something in the mail, even that would have to be okayed by the parent. In its agreement with the federal government, PARCC has committed to provide the U.S. Department of Education with all student data it receives at the state level. The federal government may also request PARCC to provide private student data to outside entities conducting studies in order to develop, validate, or administer tests, improve instruction, and perform evaluations and audits of the data. Now, what they're doing is they're taking Common Core and they're using their little test with Common Core and using your children as guinea pigs with their indoctrination scam, which is what I consider it. And they're using that to also justify giving out your child's private information without your consent. Again, another reason to pull your children out of public schools. So they're using, Common Core is basically a test, and we're going to have to do a lot of, it says here, outside entities conducting studies in order to develop, validate, or administer tests, improve instruction, and perform evaluations and audits of the data. So what that basically says to me is it validates that they're using your children as guinea pigs. They are test dummies for organizations, for companies, for the Department of Education, government, which, again, they amended it in 2011. The U.S. Department of Education did, apart from Congress. They didn't even bother to seek Congress approval for that. It's amazing. So, don't just look at the NSA. A lot of us have been talking about we shouldn't have the U.S. Department of Education. There should not be a centralized Department of Education. That is the problem. When you think you can centralize knowledge, you can't. There's different beliefs. With the same information, people come to different conclusions. Maybe similar, but of their own thought, their own emotion. The more centralized things get, the worse it gets for the individuals that aren't a part of the elite. The more centralized it gets, the greater the gap between the elites, the rich, and the poor gets. Now, you'll hear the left go, yes, talk about that. We have a division between poor and rich, and, we need Obama to fix it. That's what we're trying to do. No, actually what they're trying to do is take some of the bottom part of the rich and kick them down to the lower class. They want to shrink the size of the elites in America. That's really what they want to do. Too many people have gotten rich, and they need to clamp down on this a little bit. But they fail to tell you that as that division happened, more of the people that were in the middle class went to the higher class brackets than the lower. That would be their wording, class. It's one of those things, propaganda gets you at every turn. They have you saying their terms, but at least I catch it. But, they fail to say that. Well, should we look at classes at all? No. There's people that have money or have objects, and there's people that don't. There's people that don't want to have more than what they got. They live more of a solitude life. They like it. They live in nature. They're more hermit. There's people that just have to have flashy things. There's people that want nice things but don't really care to go all out. What we need is a free market. Something that allows for people to seek what they want. Well, you can't do that as long as you divide the country. But when you hear a lot of the right talk about, well, we need to bring more of the lower class into the middle class, and they can prosper too. And that's also what the left claims. Well, how can they both claim the same thing and neither of them can ever accomplish that? It's because they're always trying to bring rich people down to the middle class. Well, if the middle class is growing, then we could talk about, look, now we finally have the middle class growing. Who's out there fighting for the lower class to truly be able to rise up if they choose? Well, maybe they aren't lower class. Maybe they're people that want to live more solitude. That doesn't make them a lower class of people. What helps people be able to strive is a free market and the understanding that there is no class of people. You can work with the hermit person on a job and be fine. And you have a lot of things and he has none. But when that person's working with you and you have a lot and he has none and he wants a lot and he's worked as hard as you have, but you've had privileges, that's where we come into problems. And a lot of it's done by, well, regulation. Well, the privileged person shouldn't be punished for being privileged to have a family that was well off. He shouldn't be punished for that. But he shouldn't be automatically given opportunities that others aren't. Okay, I think I will play this other clip now. If I can get it to load. Might have a problem loading. It's not even loading at all. Let me try reload the page here. Okay, here it goes. This one is from Stefan Molyneux. Dead Dollar Walking. The Truth About Government Debt.
Hi, everybody. This is Stefan Mullen from Freedom Main Radio. Hope you're doing well. As I've been saying for 6 or 7 years, there will be no economic recovery. Please prepare yourselves accordingly with the latest data from 2014. This is the truth about government debt. So at the start of the financial crisis in 2007, worldwide global government debt stood at around $70 trillion. Now, a little over a half decade later, the amount of global government debt has increased 40% to over $100 trillion. During that time, the outstanding United States government debt has soared to a record $17.5 trillion. And recently, former senior economist for the President's Council of Economic Advisors, Lawrence Kotlikoff, reported that when accounting for unfunded liabilities, U.S. debt exceeds $205 trillion, right? So there's deficit, which is the amount of money the government can't pay this year. There's the debt, which is the accumulation of deficits. And then there is the unfunded liabilities, which are all the promises that governments have made to future recipients that they do not have the money for. So this is pretty staggering. It's a staggering increase in the amount of debt. Now, of course, the government says, and this is governments all around the world, but in particular the U.S. says, well, we had to spend that money, you see, because we needed to create jobs. We needed financial relief to struggling families. We need to rebuild local infrastructure, invest in small businesses, and so on. Yes, well, where is that money really going? Are you seeing much of it? Are you seeing much economic recovery? Well, no. So there's this Federal Reserve policy. The Federal Reserve, of course, is a quasi-private institution that creates money out of thin air, which the politicians then use to bribe special interest groups by selling off the unborn fetuses of the next generation to foreign banksters. And the Federal Reserve has been creating massive amounts of money. Now, they keep changing the name so that you think that the crime is different. In the past, it used to be called money creation, inflating the money supply, and before that it was called counterfeiting. Now they call it quantitative easing. And this creation of crazy fiat currency in the American economic system has been referred to as the greatest backdoor Wall Street bailout of all time. The Federal Reserve purchases assets with this money that it creates out of nothing from private banks at inflated prices, props up the price of their assets on paper. A lot of major financial institutions in the United States are technically insolvent, but they get to pretend they have more money than they do because the Federal Reserve is buying up their crappy assets at inflated prices, making them look a little bit better on paper and pretending that the whole house of cards is somehow staying up. It all would have fallen, right? So in Iceland, where they have to be a little bit more rational because it's really cold and nobody really wants to live there, so they have to make it economically more inviting. This is why warm countries tend to be the most corrupt, because you'll put up with crap to get decent weather and insecticide biplanes. But in Iceland, they basically, when the financial institutions were fraudulent and corrupt and went heavily into debt, over-leveraged, and went bankrupt, the Icelandic government said, oh, go pound sand, forget it. You're going to go out of business. Oh, and by the way, we're going to prosecute you for fraud, which is something conspicuously absent in the U.S. As a result, the Icelandic economy is doing very, very well. Billionaire hedge fund manager Stanley Druckenmiller in 2013 says, this is fantastic for every rich person. This is the biggest redistribution of wealth from the middle class and the poor to the rich ever. And this counts war. So income disparities, as you're probably aware, have been widening considerably in the United States. And whenever income disparities widen, the economy tends to do poorly for a variety of reasons. And this is another reason why things aren't going to get better anytime soon. According to economist Steve Keen, this is the biggest transfer of wealth in history, as the giant banks have handed their toxic debts from fraudulent activities to the countries and their people, right? So this is like going to the casino. You get to keep all your winnings and all of your losses are handed off to other people. Well, it doesn't take a gambling genius to make money in that situation. Robert D. Auerbach, an economist with the U.S. House of Representatives Financial Services Committee, reported that although the Federal Reserve has distributed over $2.2 trillion between August 2008 and June 2013, 81.5% of that money that is created to supposedly stimulate the economy now sits idle as private banks' excess reserve. So Federal Reserve is creating money, using it to buy up toxic assets from banks that would otherwise be insolvent, and the banks are just sitting on the money. Why? They're not required to hold these excess reserves. In fact, since 1959, the excess reserves at banks have stayed at approximately zero, because why would they leave money sitting around when they should be out there investing in businesses and people and loaning money and, greasing up economic activity? Why are they doing that? Well, because the Federal Reserve is paying them to do it, because as of 2008, Federal Reserve says, we'll pay interest on these excess reserves. We'll pay interest on whatever money you don't put into the economy. And we'll get into the why of that in a moment. Most of the Fed's new money issues of $65 billion a month is added to these excess reserves. Why are they holding all these excess reserves? Well, the Federal Reserve started paying interest, risk-free interest on those reserves, and they are discouraging the banks from lending to Main Street, right? Because if all of that money that they're creating through the Federal Reserve makes its way into the economy as a whole, inflation is going to explode. I mean, inflation is going up, but we're talking like Weimar-style hyperinflation, wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread potential for Zimbabwe supernova of the currency inflation. A lot of the people who are skeptical of Austrian economics are saying, well, the Fed is printing all this money. Why is there no hyperinflation? Well, because it's getting stuck up in the banks. Fed's giving the money to the banks and then paying the banks not to invest it in Main Street. So Federal Reserve creating $65 billion out of thin air each month to buy assets from large private banks and then pays them billions of dollars of interest on this new money when it's placed in excess reserves. Banks have $2.6 trillion in these excess reserves and are paid 0.25 percentage point interest by the Fed. That's an additional $6.5 billion annual subsidy from the general public to the private banks. Of course, the Federal Reserve doesn't really have any capacity to make money any more than the government does as a whole, so this is all debt. So this fundamentally, what has been occurring over the past 6 or 7 years, is not a financial crisis. It's a bank robbery. Profits are being privatized and losses are being socialized, right? This is the too big to fail. Why are banks swallowing up smaller banks? Because smaller banks cannot compete with banks deemed too large to fail that are almost certainly guaranteed to get government bailouts. Now, what's going to happen when all this new money leaves the excess reserves and enters the available money supply? Massive, massive inflation. Let's see where the American government is sitting at right now. President Obama's 2015 budget proposal continued to paint a troubling picture, to put it mildly. Budget deficit shrinks to $564 billion from $649 billion this year. And this is assuming that we take with any credibility the made-up magic pixie leprechaun unicorn numbers that come out of the ass of the government economists. So if you were $17,500 in debt, you cut your overspending by $85 and aimed to only be $18,064 in debt by the end of the next year, what would people say about your financial advisor? Well, he's smoking something he probably shouldn't, but in the U.S. budgetary world, this is described as sound economic policy. By 2017, U.S. taxpayers will be paying more in interest on the debt than on the budget for Medicaid. By 2020, U.S. taxpayers would be paying more in interest on the debt than they would on the entire defense budget. This is with 700 plus military bases around the world. So what does this mean? Let's break it down to person. 17.5 trillion in debt. Not even the unfunded liabilities, just the debt. $55,750 for every American. Or $121,982 for every employed American, even counting those who are clogging up the bureaucratic arteries of the government. By 2024, the total national debt would rise from 17.5 trillion to nearly 25 trillion, even using the government's own numbers. It's going to be worse than that. 25 trillion in debt amounts to almost $80,000 for every American, or almost $175,000 for every employed American. I don't know about you. When I check under my couch and in the pockets of my old jeans, I don't quite come up with that money. Maybe you're doing a little better than me in the loose change department, but there's just no way that this debt can possibly be paid off. If we include the unfunded liabilities, current debt plus unfunded liabilities of $205 trillion, that amounts to $653,074 for every single American, or over $1.4 million in debt for every employed American. you understand that this is madness. And a lot of what the government is doing is just trying to keep the house of cards propped up for just a little bit longer. They just don't want the dollar to collapse just yet. They don't want the catastrophe to occur on their watch. They basically want to scoop as much money out of what remains of the Treasury before the giant stone doors of mathematical reality come down. That which mathematically cannot continue will not continue. There will be no economic recovery. I really strongly urge you to prepare yourself accordingly, get used to these new realities. The odds are that the government is going to continue to try and do what Japan has been trying to do for the last 20 plus years, which is to continue to inject fresh, healthy blood into the zombie, rotted corpse of their existing financial institutions and pretend that they still have an economy. This is really, really important to understand. This is not going to work. And please, please don't talk to me or anyone else about blaming the free market or the death throes of capitalism. Look, there's only ever a free market when money is in the hands of the free market. Money has been taken out of the hands of the free market in America since 1913, right? So a little over 100 years, government has been in control of the money. When the government is in control of the money, there's no free market. There's a few vestiges of the free market, but that's sort of like saying there's the free market in the Soviet Union under Stalin because people did work under the table. There is very little free market left once the money is socialized. Once the money is socialized, either the money becomes privatized or the entire economy, as we're seeing under Obamacare, is going to get socialized too. So please, 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 don't even think about blaming the free market for this. Trying to blame the current mess on the free market is like disinterring a 101-year-old corpse and trying to convict it of a current murder. This is Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. Take care, my friends.
Do you really understand where this is going? Because if you didn't get the basis of it, what he's saying is the reason why we're doing okay right now, it's because the banks are still holding on to all this newly created money that has come from selling assets, bad assets, to the Federal Reserve. Do you think the Federal Reserve is going to just eat bad assets, or are they going to get something out of it? Not only that, the longer these banks are sitting on this money and getting interest off of it, so it's even multiplying at that, more assets they sell, the bigger this pot gets, the bigger a bubble gets. This will be a hyperinflation bubble that when it bursts, our dollar is nothing. Our dollar is absolutely worth nothing. You have Russia and China working hard to end the U.S. dollar. As you know, the world reserve currency, you know, the petrodollar. You have Russia ignoring the U.S. right now. If they can take parts of Ukraine, that's more people to prop up their currencies, their choice. Both Russia and China have gold, lots of it. They can kill our dollar. Now you take that and work it with the Federal Reserve and what they're doing and the private banks and the money that they're holding and this bubble that they're creating. Is that not a perfect storm? Only one of those actually have to happen to collapse the U.S. dollar where it stands right now. If Russia and China can really move away from the U.S. dollar when it comes to oil trades, they can collapse the dollar. If this bubble bursts, if it gets really big, if they don't release all that money now, which it's going to almost kill a dollar, if not kill it, then, and they let it get bigger, it's going to definitely kill it. I don't know if they're hoping on some type of miracle or if they really are just ready to allow it to get to that point. Now, only one of those have to be successfully completed to kill the dollar. If both of those end up happening, I don't think we're prepared for what will happen. I really don't think enough Americans are ready for it, are aware of the possibilities. I think media, well, I don't want to just say media, but I think there's been some directors out there, some screenwriters that have tried to hint to this in movies. Some people call it predictive programming. I think sometimes they are trying to hint to people, hey, you know, this is going on, you might want to watch out. Kind of throw their own little propaganda in it. Well, shoot, you have the IRS trying to get a list of the libertarian or conservatives in Hollywood that have their own, like, little club going there that if they're found out by the liberal owned Hollywood that they would be blacklisted. Talking about blacklisting, haven't really seen much of Mel Gibson. They really, kind of butchered his reputation, didn't they? It's kind of funny how they butcher his reputation, and he's happened to play in a lot of movies that promote liberty and freedom. Whether it be your version of liberty and freedom or not, he's been a pretty big advocate of liberty and freedom and try to, you know, pick roles that did that. You know, Braveheart, The Patriot, just saying. Might not be your brand or your, ideology of what liberty or freedom is, but I'm trying to point out, you know, he might have been blacklisted here and his reputation smeared, and then you have IRS trying to get list of some of these people. Kind of makes you wonder. But that's all speculation. You know, I'm just looking into possibilities because that's basically what you have to do. They're not going to tell you what's going on. Okay, before we end the broadcast, I had a couple other things I wanted to touch upon. This one, coming out of activist post. New executive order. Obama has just given himself the authority to seize your assets. On Monday, the U.S. government took steps to seize the U.S. Based assets of Russian lawmakers and anyone else that the U.S. government deemed complicit in supporting the Crimean secession movement. So, if you support it, they could seize your assets. Well, good thing I don't support it or hate it. I just don't care. That's their business. That's how I look at it. It's the Crimeans' business, not mine. We've seen the U.S. government do this in countries, cases surrounding drug and financial crimes, and sometimes even against foreign leaders like Saddam Hussein and Manuel Noriega. What makes this particularly instance so unprecedented and terrifying is that President Obama went so far as to issue a new executive order to give himself the authorization to do so, because the laws of the United States are such that our government is not allowed to simply take someone's bank assets, home, or business without due process. Here's the kicker. The new executive order doesn't just apply to Russians or foreigners. It gives blanket coverage, so even American citizens could now face asset forfeiture if their actions are deemed to be contributing to the situation in the Ukraine. Be careful what you say, be careful what you write. President Obama has just given himself the authority to seize your assets. And according to the president's recent executive order, blocking property of certain persons contributing to the situation in Ukraine. I'm not going to read all that. Like most executive orders and government legalese, the definition for why an individual would have their assets seized under this directive are extremely broad, and they could, for all intents and purposes, be used against anyone who supports Russian interests or simply argues against those of the United States. And you can pick up the rest of that article at activistpost.com. New executive order. Obama has just given himself the authority to seize your assets. So now if you go, well, I think Crimea has the right to join with those guys up there. Well, if you support it, then with this legislation, because of how broad it is, you as an American citizen can have your assets taken from you because you supported or, basically supported. You don't support the U.S. stopping Russia or interfering, but you support Russia being allowed to allow Crimeans to vote to join Russia. I think the whole situation over there is messed up. I don't support either side. I don't support anybody, really. There's no one over there going, hey, I want to be an individual, and why don't we just be our own country, our own people? You guys do live with each other, so. Well, yeah, I got enough time to cover this. I have one here out of the libertarianrepublic.com. Says here, I'm a libertarian in Ukraine. USA, please help. This kind of made me go, what? And it says here, should USA help Ukraine? It says here, Ron Paul, one of the honorary leaders of the American Libertarian Movement, recently reacted to the crisis in Crimea. Typically, Paul accused U.S. foreign policy and intervention in affairs of a foreign state, but surprisingly, he made a step further justifying Vladimir Putin. He thinks that the U.S. should not assist Ukraine. Putin has some law on his side, says Ron Paul. he points to a lease Russia held on a naval base in Crimea, city of Sevastopol. However, military units spread around the peninsula are considered to be Russian military. Again, are considered to be. There's no proof of it. The problem is the fact that those units are not acknowledged by Russia. Therefore, one is not justified in accusing Russia of a military aggression. Formally, that's true. These forces also claim to be units of self-defense force recently created in Crimea. However, these forces are armed with weapons and wear uniforms which are spread in Russian army. Their vehicles have Russian registration numbers. For the majority of the Ukrainians, it is evident that these troops are Russian. Though it is possible to argue for Paul's position and say that weapons, uniforms, and vehicles are brought by self-defense force, neither Russia nor the U.S. is prohibited from selling their types of goods. The heart of the problem is whether we admit that these forces are Russian or not. This case should not be ignored, because if they are Russian soldiers, then it means that Russia broke the Budapest memorandums on security assurances signed in 1994 by both the U.S. and Russia, among others, where the country's participators claim to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine. Moreover, the fact that Putin asked Russian parliament to approve a military intervention in Crimea on the 1st of March shows that there was an intention to violate the Budapest memorandum by Russia. But why should U.S. care about it and waste time and money investigating the case? Turns out that Russia violated the memorandum indeed. I'm not even going to go through all this. Now, the problem is the Libertarian Republic is trying to argue that, Russia broke these laws and that gives us the right to go in there or do sanctions. But, again, no one's talking about the Crimeans. Crimeans are like a tug of war. They're the rope in this tug of war. And why don't I support the Crimeans? Because the Crimeans need to just stand up and say, let us be Crimea. You are a split population. Become your own nation. Deal with Ukraine and the West, and deal with Russia in the East, and have free trade and be prosperous. And don't buy into the pick a side, as Ukraine has been doing. They are basically playing the same game that Ukraine was playing, except they're just on the different side and they're smaller than the country as a whole. But it's the same game. And if Ukraine is divided, why not allow Ukraine to split itself in half and take that choice? The problem is we are still trying to dictate whether Crimeans want it or not. The memorandum says that it's to stay part of Ukraine. Therefore, if the Ukraine government wants to be so westernized and not deal with Russia, then the Russian-speaking Crimeans will just have to deal with it. All of it's wrong. We need more free thought. And while you guys enjoy your weekend, do a little bit of free thinking. Take care and enjoy your weekend, and stay tuned here on UCY.tv for all the great broadcasts.